This is the Huey Alert Podcast with Craig and Shelley Huey, bringing you the tools to transform our nation and culture, the intersection of faith and politics.
Hi, it's Craig Huey, the Huey Alert, and I'm so glad you're with us. And I'm right now excited about what we're talking about. We're going to be talking about what is inflation, what do you do about inflation, how do we stop it, what can we expect in the coming months, and about what's going on in business. What's the mega trend that's impacting you and I today? Now, I don't have with me Shelley this time. She'll be with us next week. But I'm so excited. We've got Stephen Soukup as our guest. He's vice president and publisher of the Political Forum, and he is an expert on business and the economy. And so, Stephen, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Craig. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. And I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Everybody has suffered because prices are rising.
Yes.
What's happening? Why did that happen? And then let's talk about what we can do about it.
Well, there are a couple of reasons why inflation has been so high over the past 4 or 5 years. The first reason is that after the great financial crisis of 2008, the Federal Reserve decided that it just wanted to give away money.
Yes.
Free money as far as the eye could see. Long after the crisis was over, long after the COVID crisis was over, the Fed continued to keep rates artificially low, essentially allowing people to borrow as much money as they wanted to, businesses to borrow as much money as they wanted to, with the assumption that there would never be any repercussions.
Right.
And that's a big part. You know, as Milton Friedman said, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon.
Yes.
The other reason is fiscal policy. Again, over the last 15, 20 years, the federal government has spent an awful lot of money. And the Biden administration in particular has spent a ton.
I think it's like $7 trillion.
Yeah.
And a national debt, what's 36 trillion right now?
Yeah. The national debt jumped by 13% since June.
Right.
And a big part of the reason is that inflation caused higher interest rates. And now we're paying more to service the debt than anything right now except for entitlements. And by the end of the year, we'll be paying more to service the interest on the debt
Which
than
is
even
insane.
entitlements.
You know, that the Bible tells and warns against going into debt. Here we are paying interest to bankers and investors on services that should be going for building bridges that have been torn down by the hurricane, or military protection, or justice, for a court system that works. It's going to the wrong purposes.
Well, not only is it going to the wrong purposes, but we're spending considerably more money than we're taking in revenues.
Yeah.
At this point, I believe that income taxes account for only 40% of federal spending. That's ridiculous.
It is.
It's absolutely absurd.
And that's where I would say inflation is the most immoral tax of them all.
Absolutely.
So we've all seen it in the grocery stores. We've seen it everywhere we go to shop. Outrageous. And while the politicians keep saying it's going to go down, is it going to go down?
Well, even if it does temporarily, it is in fact endemic in our system at this point. As long as our federal government continues to spend so recklessly, and as long as our federal government continues to borrow so heavily, we're going to be facing endemic inflation as far as the eye can see. Right now, inflation appears to be largely under control, but that doesn't compensate for the fact that we had massive inflation over the past couple of years.
Right.
Prices don't go back
They
down
don't go
just
down
because inflation is slowing. Additionally, the Fed's cut of 50 basis points last month. There's a very serious risk that it could reignite inflation.
Yeah.
You add to the fact that there are wage pressures on businesses. You see, for example, that the dock workers settled their strike for a 62% pay increase over the next 10 years. Wages are going to have to keep up with prices. And as wage inflation pushes up, so will the rest of inflation.
Right.
So we're right now in a cycle where you can expect inflation to be
A
endemic.
vicious cycle that's going to hurt everyone. And so we have to be of the mindset as consumers not to expect prices ever to go down with this environment of overspending, but very probably continue to go up, whether it be 2% or 5% or 10%, whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah. Even if the Fed hits its inflation target of 2%,
Right.
prices are never going to go back to where they were in 2020 or
Sad.
2021. That's just the way inflation works. It just keeps going, ratcheting up and up and up. So even if we manage to get inflation under control, the past couple years have done real damage to the consumer and to our pocketbook.
And you know, I tell my kids, if you are not getting pay that that's higher than the inflation rate, you're actually losing money. And I tell my kids that, you know, you've got to be able to plan for that because it's not going to go down. And beyond that, what are you doing to protect yourself?
Well, that's one of the things that Senator Vance mentioned in the debate the other night, and I think it probably escaped most people what he was saying. Certainly, it escaped the moderators, and it probably even escaped Governor Vance as to what, pardon me, Governor Walz, as to what he was saying.
Yeah.
But his point was that real wages went up under the Trump administration, and real wages are going down under the Biden administration. That means that even if you get a raise, it's not keeping up with inflation.
Right.
So your actual purchasing power is decreasing.
And if you're on
because
a
of the rate of
pension, if
inflation.
you're on retired,
Right. If you're on
Yeah.
a fixed income, you
yeah,
don't have a prayer.
right.
It's very difficult. The thing that you have to do is essentially you have to save, and you have to collectively we have to change the culture in our political world to convince our politicians that they need to control themselves, that they need to control the spending, that they can't continue to spend outrageously every year, that they can't continue to pass an omnibus rather than to pass, the individual
So the
budget bill.
solution lies with Congress. The solution lies with the overspending to stop it. And one of the things as a business owner is it impacts business greatly.
Oh yeah,
Businesses are hurt. Businesses cut back. Businesses go out of business. And we are right now in a situation where we're seeing businesses transition in so many different ways economically. You've been also following how they've transitioned politically. Can you give us a kind of idea of what that is?
Well, one of my focuses over the past 4 or 5 years is the politicization of American business, and
Yes.
specifically the politicization of American capital markets.
Right.
For the past 250 years, it's been understood that the purpose of a corporation is to make money for its owners,
Right.
to make money for its shareholders within certain bounds, within
Right.
certain ethical bounds
Right.
that are generally dictated by society.
Yeah.
That was Milton Friedman's dictum that he wrote in 1972, that the responsibility of a corporate executive is to do what's best for the shareholders,
Right.
which is usually to make as much money as possible. Over the past 5 years, starting in 2019, in large part with the Business Roundtable's declaration that they were changing the definition of the purpose of a corporation.
Right.
We have gotten into a position where business suddenly believes that it is responsible for making political change,
Yes.
in addition to conducting business.
Yes.
And that's not only a detriment to shareholders, to consumers, to workers, but it's also of significant detriment to the American voters, because
Right.
what they're doing essentially is usurping the power of the voters
Yeah.
to act politically outside of the political realm.
Right. Wow. So that is a description. How do you turn that around?
Well, we've been working fairly diligently, a loose coalition of organizations and individuals have been pushing business to get back to its primary business purpose, to serve customers, to provide good jobs for workers, and to provide return on investment for its owners. There are a number of different ways that this can be done. Some organizations, like the Free Enterprise Project at the National Center for Public Policy Research, has spent the last 10 to 15 years pushing shareholder resolutions to convince,
which is powerful.
right, to essentially engage with business and to convince them that they need to get out of politics and back to business.
Right.
Some organizations are operating from the shareholder perspective. Other organizations are pushing laws at the state level, or other organizations are pushing laws at the federal level to restrict how much business can get involved or in politics. And I think that's important. There are other people doing other things. For example, Robbie Starbuck has spent the filmmaker turned political activist, has spent the last several months investigating and publishing information about the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies of large businesses, particularly businesses with conservative consumer bases, so that he can show the consumers what the money they spend is going for, just how aggressively the companies they spend their money with are undermining their way of life and their culture.
Right. DEI, I describe it in my book, Great Deception, for what it is and the harm it's done. And now that we've had a Supreme Court ruling that might impact DEI, what do you see happening? It seems like some companies have had DEI as part of their corporate objective have backed away from it, are dropping some of the employees that were getting bloated salaries in charge of it in the corporation. What do you see that trend is?
Well, there are a couple of counterbalancing trends. The first is, all of the companies that were pushing back on advice from consumers who were educated by Robbie about what they were doing, have backed away from the DEI policies, and specifically have backed away from the Human Rights Campaign, which is a gay rights organization that has really pushed companies to be very aggressive in pushing a
very powerful lobby.
A very
successful lobby too.
Left-wing political agenda. And so a lot of these companies are moving away specifically from using the HRC's guidelines for how to operate a business. And I think that there's a potential there for there to be a preference cascade, for everyone to see that there is opposition to the HRC that they didn't understand, that they didn't realize was there, and that for businesses to take this opportunity to push back, and for more and more businesses to push back. But at the same time, there is some information coming out that these corporations are backing away publicly, but privately are continuing some of these same policies. So again, we have a couple of counterbalancing trends here. We have a public disowning of DEI, and specifically the HRC's influence on DEI, and at the same time, we have a private maintenance of some of these policies. So it's difficult to say what's going to happen, but I think that certainly drawing more public attention can't hurt.
So, Stephen, I think you wrote a book that kind of gives more detail of that megatrend that went on with business and where it's at. Can you tell me about that book?
Right. Back in 2001, I wrote a book called The Dictatorship of Woke Capital. And that served essentially as the tip of the spear in the attack on the ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing, and on, what obviously I term woke capital in the title. It preceded Vivek Ramaswamy's book by about 3 months, but Vivek's book was essentially covering some of the same topics and some of the same issues from the same position, that this is this is an assault on American
Right.
business. This is not the way American business is supposed to
Right.
function. This is not the way capital markets are supposed
Right.
to function, and not the way asset managers are supposed to behave.
Right.
That's what the book is about. And that's, as I said, it served as sort of the awakening and the tip of the spear for this movement that is now 3+ years in, and has been far more successful than I expected it to be. It's been really
How do you get the book?
potent. Well, you get the book at Amazon, or because Amazon is one of the companies I detail in the book as being a bad actor, you can order it directly from my publisher at Encounter Books.
Encounter Books.
Correct.
And the name of the book is
The Dictatorship of Woke Capital.
The Dictatorship of Woke Capitalism.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being with us. And everyone, I encourage you, get the book. You can get it at Encounter Books or hopefully from Amazon.
You can get it from Amazon.
And
yep.
it's called The
Dictatorship of Woke Capital.
Dictatorship of Woke Capital.
Yep.
And I encourage you to get that. And we talked about DEI. We talked about ESG investing. And I've got a chapter in my book, The Great Deception, on that. It really gives you an insight into it, and also about what's going on with the economic issue of inflation. So I encourage you to get both books and be able to share this entire episode with your friends. Text it, email it, put it on Facebook. Just whatever you can, get this word out. And Stephen, thanks so much. Before we go,
yes,
would you mind if I prayed?
No, I'd appreciate it very much.
That'd be great. Father, I just thank you for Stephen. I ask that you give him protection, give him energy, and give him wisdom as he speaks before groups, as he is on the media, as he goes and does his activities to be able to make a change here in America of education and being able to implement change in Congress. And so, Lord, I pray that the message be strong and that you give him protection. I also ask God that you just fill him with energy to be able to deliver that message. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Hey, Stephen, thanks so much.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it.
Until next week, God bless you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week. We are listener-supported, so please consider partnering with us by donating at craighuey.com or by signing up for our free newsletter. We look forward to being with you next week. And don't forget to share this podcast with others.